And welcome once back more, my fellow travellers in space of time, to the writing stream. It's good to be here. It's Monday evening. Well, here in the UK, it's Monday evening. I'm going to have to be wary of the whole spherical planet thing and different time zones, because we have special guests coming with us this evening who are not in the same locale. How about that? For the wonders of the internet, it's going to be really good. So just before I introduce my special guests who are waiting in the wings, we obviously have to do the thing because the thing is the thing. So let me just go scrolling all the way back to the top of the chat. Right, who is here? We have Pete SB is online. Good to see you, Pete SB. Spooktooth, first time chat, is here as well. Fantastic. Good to see you as well. Have a Boo Boo is here. Jeej is here. Good to see you, Jeej. Commander JR 1988 is here. The Big Boo is here with plenty of waffles. That's always exciting as well. Have a Boo Boo again. Rakus is here, fending off the invasion of the Harkonnens. Feather the Crow is here as well. Kelly Bagler is here, thinking again. The Harkonnens are also here, ready to invade Arrakis. Apparently I'm in the chat. Not sure what I'm doing there, but never mind. Right, Stumpy73 is here. Wintermute GB is here, of course, of course. Glenn is here. Commander Terra Firma as well. And we have Anne-Marie from Fantastic Books Publishing. Welcome back to you, Anne-Marie. Good to see you as well. And Penny Grab as well from Fantastic Books. Everybody's here, ready to listen in. So, right, you know who I am, but you don't know who my special guests are. Well, you probably do if you've been paying any attention to Fantastic Books page. I have with me the amazing Walt Pilcher and Mark P. Henderson. Now, with the wonders of technology, I'm hoping that when I press a couple of buttons at the moment, they will still be here. So, fingers crossed. I'm going to press the buttons now. We'll see if it still works. Hang on a minute. Here we go. Right, so, Walt, can you hear me, Walt? Come in, Walt.
Yes, you pressed my button.
Excellent. I pressed this button. I'm just going to adjust the volume there a tiny little bit. Fantastic. That's good. And Mark, are you still there as well?
I am, Drew, thank you.
Fantastic. Right, so special guests are Walt Pilcher and Mark P. Henderson, fellow authors from Fantastic Books Publishing. Now we're not in the same genre, so this is going to be a little bit more of an interesting conversation, I think, this evening. But before we get to any of that, I'm going to ask the guys to give us a brief, I don't know, let's say 30 seconds, a minute, whatever they feel like, about who they are and what they're kind of doing, where they come from, anything else they'd like to share about themselves. So Walt, can I prevail upon you to go first, totally randomly, because you're the first person on my screen?
Okay, that works. Well, I'm sitting over here in High Point, North Carolina, on the east coast of the United States, where the time is a little after 3 p.m. And I was just telling the other Drew and Mark that we got our our second COVID booster shot this morning. So I'm raring to go and feeling invincible, and nothing can touch me. But
Excellent.
As far as background is concerned, my joke is always, well, it started in a log cabin in Illinois, but that usually ends up being about Abraham Lincoln and doesn't work for me. But I really grew up in the Washington, D.C. area and went to school, high school and so forth there, went to college in Connecticut, went to graduate school in California, and then spent most of my career actually in the women's pantyhose business. I think you folks call them tights, but... I worked for the company that made Legs pantyhose, the ones in the plastic eggs that some of you over there may have heard of, and that was a lot of fun, especially since I have a wife and 2 daughters as well as a son. So we went through an awful lot of women's hosiery while I was having that career, and it was a perfect timing. Worked out very well. When I left the industry, people stopped wearing pantyhose, pretty much, and I'm not sure there's a connection there, but anyway. And then after that, I kind of always wanted to be a writer, so once I retired, I was able to get kind of serious about it, and to make that long story even shorter, several books have come out of it, and Fantastic Books Publishing were brave enough to risk their reputation by publishing, I guess now, and I appreciate that very much.
Excellent. Well, I'm fascinated to meet the man behind the United States pantyhose business. So that's quite an honour. I'm not sure if I'll ever top that one. So that's fabulous, brilliant stuff. Walt, thank you very much for that. So over to Mark. Mark, are you going to have to do something to top that? I'm afraid, but give it your best shot. See how it goes.
I have to say, Drew, that owing to some fault, no doubt, in the technology, I didn't hear most of Walt's exposition, only the final sentence or two.
Oh, well,
Which
it was a lot to do about pantyhose, which did I say more?
I would have been fascinated. Okay. Now, as for me, yes. Well, once upon a time, I was a hospital doctor, and then I saw the light and got into medical research instead. And then I took early retirement from that. I did a bit of part-time teaching in a men's prison. Moved into the Peak District of Derbyshire, and that's for those across the other parts of the world. That's more or less in the middle of England. Um, and then I started to collect and tell local traditional folk tales. Um, I set up a one-man editing business, mainly working with scientific and medical manuscripts, though some fiction as well. And then I started hand at fiction writing, and in the end was lucky enough to get one or two things published. Um, and in 2016, I made a connection with Fantastic Books Publishing, who have been very much my main publisher since then. I've developed a very nice friendly relationship with them. I should say that I don't write in any particular genre. I write in, well, whatever genres happen to catch my when I feel like it. And I am extremely old. 14 demonstrates, and I have applied to have myself registered as a scheduled ancient monument.
That's a good idea. I haven't actually thought about applying to be a monument. I might add that to my to-do list in a few years' time. I think that sounds like an excellent thing to do. Excellent, guys. Thank you for the introduction. So I mean, I'm immediately, and I think a few other people on the stream are going to be jealous as well. I mean, you both managed to retire. I mean, that's that's quite an achievement nowadays. So that's a good first. So. I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to ask you to sort of take turns in answering it, I think, to kind of get the ball rolling. The question is, you're writing now as kind of retired folks, but was writing always there? Has it been there since childhood? Has it picked up during, dare I say it, middle age and all those other things? Did you have time for any writing when you were still at work, or is it something you've only been able to indulge in, in the later years? Can I? Well, let's take it out of order. Actually, I'm going to go and ask Mark that one first and give Walt time to prepare.
Yes, that's it's a very good question, of course. Well, on the one hand, of course, we make up stories for our children. I wouldn't call that writing in particular, but I've always been interested in story. When I was a boy, a teenager, I heard local traditional folk tales, and that is why later in life I've got round to collecting and telling them. But as for writing, well, in medicine you write technical papers, and in scientific research you write papers. And you learn certain writing virtues. Doing so, you learn to be precise. You learn to use correct English mechanics to get your grammar, your spelling, and your punctuation correct. You learn to be succinct. You learn to be organised. And those are all virtues that transfer to practically any sort of writing. But when I got out of then tried to write fiction instead, I found there was a great deal that I had to unlearn. This is mainly because in writing technically, scientifically, medical papers and so forth, you are being objective, dispassionate, emotion-free. There is no plot, there is no control and rise of tension, flow of narrative. There is, of course, no characterization. And to write fiction, I had to teach myself all those things. And I did so by reading what seemed to me to the best sort of literature. Is that an adequate answer?
Yeah, I think that's a good start. Yeah, I might pick a few bits and pieces out of that in time, but yeah, that's a great start. Super stuff. Walt, same question to you, if I may. Have you been writing for a long, long time, or is it something you've just indulged in dare I say it, your later years?
My September years. Oh, yes. No, I've been writing since I was 9 years old, maybe even before. I wrote a 59-word detective story when I was 9 years old. It was called The Case of the Muddy Shoes, and
Okay,
I still have it. I think
excellent.
on the original, the original yellowed paper. But no, my parents taught me at a very early age how to read and to have an appreciation for authors and writing. There's a card game called Authors that we played at home. All the famous authors that many of whom I can't name right now, but you would have heard of all of them. Many of them are English actually, and so that instilled in me a sense of the importance of storytelling and so forth. But I realized as I went through school, and writing this and that for school projects as well as some creative writing, that I probably couldn't make a living at it. That takes a great deal of combination of skill, but also luck and connections, of which I had none. So I decided to major in things in college that would get me into business. But I could not stop writing on the side, even while in business. And I agree with Mark that the process of business writing is a very good learning process because you do have to learn the rules. Nevertheless, even though there are some rules and you have to know about the spelling and the punctuation and the grammar, you're often writing persuasively. You're making a presentation to the board of directors, or you're writing a memo trying to get somebody to agree with you about this or that. So there's a great deal of creativity involved in that as well. And then on the side, I would write fake memos and send them around to my colleagues.
Excellent.
For example, one year the nylon crop failed, and we had to send out a warning letter to everyone. And I would write fake commercials and so on and so forth. And you have to realize that I was taking a bit of a risk here, that my superiors would think I wasn't taking the business seriously enough. But I managed somehow to rise up through the ranks to the point where I became senior enough that I could do it with impunity, and I did. So, and in fact, back in the 70s is when I really started working on the first novel, which turned out to be Everybody Shrugged that Fantastic Books published. But and I always had a desire to be published as an author. So, but it wasn't really until after I did retire that I got to do it more seriously and take a couple of writing courses here, joined the local writers group, and got into a poetry critique group and some other things that gave me some experience and the ability to rub shoulders with some other writers and compare notes and learn the craft that way.
Okay, that sounds very cool. A question has come in from the chat already. So it's a slightly silly question, but my job is just to basically just refer the question. So the first question is, will Mark's monument wear Walt's pantyhose?
I think that would have to be discussed with the authorities. I don't make any pronouncement on it myself.
No, I think I'd defer to that judgment call. I think yes.
If
So,
you're looking for strange uses of pantyhose, I can give you a couple. One, of course, is that it's the favorite disguise of bank robbers.
oh, of
You
course, yes, it is,
Yes.
isn't it? Yeah.
put the pantyhose over your head. And the other one is if you need a spare fan belt for your Volkswagen Beetle, a pair of pantyhose is often the right thing.
Wow. I shall bear that. I haven't got a Volkswagen Beetle, but I have got a Volkswagen Golf, but I suspect it won't work for that. Um, but if I ever get a Volkswagen Beetle, which I would like to have actually, that I will bear that in mind as a top tip. I do remember actually, because this has got nothing to do with writing, of course, but old cars used to have fan belts that actually were fan belts, didn't they? And I do remember pantyhose or stockings, of course, as we call them in the UK, I think. Being a temporary fix for that particular problem. So
Yes.
That's right. Exactly right.
That's excellent. Fabulous stuff. Fabulous stuff. Okay, so kind of moving on. So pick a book that. Well, I mean, probably since Fantastic Books is in the chat, and will probably be expecting me to talk about some of their stuff. Oh, I've just had one of the people in the chat basically say the stockings won't work. You need frilly knickers for Volkswagen Golf, apparently. So there we go. In terms of stuff that you've worked with Fantastic Books, pick a book that you have published with them, and tell us a little bit about the sort of stuff that you write, because I'm already intrigued by Mark basically saying he takes the genre thing and kind of just ignores it, which is quite interesting. So Mark, can you pick a book and take us a little bit through what it is, what it's about, and what you were kind of trying to achieve in writing it, if you were trying to achieve anything. So Mark, take us away with a Fantastic Books publishing book, if that makes sense.
Well, I'll pick up the theme you just mentioned there, Drew, that I don't know about genre. Well, I wrote one book in which I quite deliberately mixed every genre that I could think of.
Excellent.
And this was National Cake Day in Ruritania, which, as the title suggests, is not the most serious of novels. It has elements of romance, adventure, spy fiction, political thriller, and a bit of sci-fi and a bit of horror, and everything else to list. I don't think I quite got a western into it, but just about everything else. It's a story of an imperial revolution in an imaginary country.
Okay.
And that gives me a good basis for satire. And not only did I mix possible genre, I had a go in that book at satirizing everything.
Right.
Politics, economics, law, philosophy, science, medicine, and so on. I even managed to satirize folklore.
Okay.
Well, it made a few philosophical points, but it was just fun. And it's a book that some people have read and thought, what on earth is the point of this? And other people have killed themselves laughing reading it.
Right.
Which is the reaction that I was rather hoping.
Excellent. So is that? I mean, what were you trying to kind of? Were you trying to achieve anything particular? Was the goal just to make people laugh? Was it one of those books that you just thought, I'm just going to write this because what the hell? What was the sort of motivation behind it in terms of this is a book that needs to be?
It was satire. You write satire when things make you angry,
right?
And instead of being angry,
yeah,
joke of it. Okay, so I made jokes about politics and economics and aspects of medicine that just annoyed me, and that was really what I was doing in that book. Let's make people laugh at things that are basically very silly and very annoying.
Right. Okay. Yep. So I'm assuming you've got plenty of ammunition for new books, given the machinations of the great and the good and the powerful in the modern day world as well. I'd have thought.
I have enough years left in my life to write them all. I really, it's absolutely quite so.
Quite so.
You could have a wonderful time with the trouble is you can't write satire anymore because some of these idiots
comes true, doesn't it? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, is this satire? No, it's no. That's just reality. Yeah, I know the problem. Brilliant stuff. Okay, let me switch over to Walt. So Walt, pick a book again from the Fantastic Book stable and talk us through what you were doing there.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that even though Mark and I write in different genres, I guess, so to speak, or I don't write most of the kind of things he writes, what we have in common is our love for satire and parody. And that's basically what I write. I don't know what genre you'd put it in. Two of my books are about a reluctant amateur detective. So, is that a crime novel? Is that a detective story? Put it wherever you want. I'm glad that Fantastic Books is not a publisher that worries too much about being able to categorize things and pigeonhole them into genres. I have run into situations with publishers where they've said, not with any of the books that Fantastic Books has published, but with one other that I came up with, which is actually nonfiction. They said, we'd love to publish your book, but we don't know what genre to put it in. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
said, that's ridiculous. Anyway, I got it. So I self-published it, and it's fine. But as far as a specific book from Fantastic Books is concerned, I guess I should talk about the two that are one being launched and one that's on being spotlighted. The spotlighted one is called the Accidental Spurt, and this is the first one in the Mark Fairley mystery series. This is the reluctant amateur detective who gets downsized from his job in Greensboro, North Carolina. He has a white collar job. He gets downsized. What's he going to do? He sends out resumes, scores of resumes, no responses. He's got three kids in college. He's got a mortgage. What in the world is he going to do? Well, he gets roped into a consulting gig at a company in a nearby town, and ostensibly what they want him to do is to write the history of the company because they think a big Japanese company is going to buy it, and they're afraid that the history of this company will be lost forever. So he goes down there to see if he can apply for this consulting gig, and he finds out that and he gets it, but he finds out what they really want him to do is to go undercover and help them figure out what really happened to the president of the company who was killed in a suspicious explosion,
Okay.
and the chairman of the company who has a bizarre accident on the bottling line. It's a company that makes energy drinks. So that's what he does, and that's so the overarching premise is, uh, guy gets downsized out of work. What does he do? And he ends up being this reluctant amateur detective. The second book in the series is called Killing O'Carolyn, and I can explain the title later on as we go forward here. But um, this is the situation where Mark Fairley, the protagonist, finds himself reluctantly undercover in the arts community in Greensboro because someone is poisoning poets in Greensboro, and there seems to be no rhyme or reason to it. So
Excellent.
the question is, can Mark go undercover in the arts community and find out whose muse has run amok and restore poetic justice to the city?
Fantastic. You've clearly thought about that a little bit. That's really good. I must admit, I'm useless at doing pitches of my books, trying to summarise what the heck's going on. But yeah, congratulations for that. That was nice as a thing. That's really really good. Okay, so you guys have definitely got something in common with this whole satire thing. Do you think that comes with dare I say it, some shall I say the September years? I think that was the phrase you used. Well, I quite like that. I think I might borrow that. Do you get to the point in life where you think actually there's no point taking anything seriously anymore because experience has basically taught that, that's just the way to go? Is that fair? I'm going to chuck that back at Walt first, I think.
I don't think I've ever taken myself too seriously. Um, when you have to be serious, you get serious. When you have to buckle down and work hard, you buckle down and work hard.
Yep.
It means an overnight or a weekend or whatever it is, you do what it takes. It's like in the M.A.B.L.E movie and the series where it's a total anti-war thing. They didn't take anything seriously. But when the wounded soldiers came in, by golly, they got to work and they were
Yeah.
serious about doing what they had to do. So you have to be realistic and do that. But I guess I can cite the first book that fantastic books published, which is called On Shallowed Ground. It's a collection of my short stories and poems and a bunch of other stuff, and in several different genres. But the cover, and this is a brilliant cover that they did for me. It's a picture of Moses coming down from the mountain, and
Right.
he's carrying one tablet, and on the tablet is the 11th commandment. And the 11th commandment is, "Thou shalt not take thyself too seriously."
Excellent.
And that's the theme of the book, and it's really the theme of pretty much everything I write.
Excellent. No, I like that. I like that. Mark, so same sort of question. Did you find that as time wears on, you take things, you just have to laugh at everything, or at least find the humour in everything? Shall I say? What's your view?
Oh yes, I think that is true. I mean, as Walt said, you when you have to work very hard at something and really buckle down, there are times when you get out of that, and the way you unwind is by having a laugh at it all.
Yep.
So just that experience early in life, in your working life, I think teaches you to see the funny side of things. But as you get older, you do see things from a different and perhaps broader perspective. And really things that look terribly serious at one time just don't look terribly serious anymore. And yes, it then does become easier to satirize.
Yeah.
I must say, incidentally, that those two books that Walt mentioned, The Accidental Spout and Killing O'Callaghan, are absolutely hilarious. I read both of them, and I just couldn't stop laughing. Just
Excellent. I think it's always a good sign when another writer reads somebody else's work and enjoys it. That's always good. I say I haven't had a chance to read them myself yet, but they're on my to-do list. I've been a bit behind schedule, unfortunately, with these interviews, and I haven't had a chance to read some of your stuff before I interview, which is not what I normally do. But they're on my TBR list, so I will definitely get around to them. That's really good. I've had a request. I'm not sure what this means. I'm assuming, Walt, this will mean something to you. But it's basically ask Walt to tell the story of the spear. So, Walt, take it away.
The spear, SPEAR.
That's what it says. SPEAR. Yeah.
Yes, this is a story that I think I told in the acknowledgments or preface or introduction to On Shallowed Ground.
Yep.
And it's one of those stories where you just have to step back and say, okay, if this is what life is all about, I've got to satirize it. Anyway, I think it was in junior high school, maybe 8th grade or something like that. And I had a science teacher whose name was Mr. Zook, Zook, and I'm not trying to make fun of his name, but it kind of fits what happened.
Zook. Excellent. Yeah.
And he was always trying to bring in practical exercises, and I have to appreciate him for that. But one of the practical exercises he brought in one day was a 6-foot African spear with a metal tip on the thing. He had a bunch of us boys take one of the bookcases, which was full of books, and turn it around so that it's facing the wall, and he chucked the spear into the back of the bookcase. I don't know how many books he ruined by doing that, and I have no idea what the point of it was. All I know is that
very sharp point, I'd have thought. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but for the rest of the term, I never turned my back on Mr. Zook.
No, I don't think that's very, very wise indeed. You wouldn't get away with that nowadays, would you? Bringing spears into school.
No,
I think the fact that you never found out why is even better, because it's just leave it there hanging for the rest of eternity. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you very much for that. That's brilliant. Just a note for the chat. So people watching in the chat, if you would like to chuck any questions at Walt and or at Mark, or both, of course, then feel free just to ask them in the chat, and I shall relay them across. So feel free to try that. That's quite good. Quite a few people picking up on the genre thing, actually, guys. It's interesting. A few people are basically saying it's good to have a publisher that kind of is taking more of a relaxed view on genre. It seems to be a thing that comes up quite a lot, as what genre do you write in, or what genre is your book supposed to be in? And it's I find it personally quite a constricting, bit of a straitjacket really. That's a strange thing as well. So yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it seems to be a good theme. So I'm pleased to have both of you on the stream in terms of fellow writers who basically are busting the genre straitjacket. So that's really really good. There we go. Right, I suppose actually a question has come in, Mind Wipe, and actually I just had a raid there also from Local Sofa. I don't know who they are, but welcome to Local Sofa. And Bowie Darling and 3Play J3 are here. So anyway, welcome. And they like my hat. Thank you very much. That's very good. Hats are things that writers do. So there we go. That's what's good. Guys, have you converted your books to audio? And if you have, or if you haven't, are you thinking about converting them to audio? I'll fire that one at Mark first, I think.
I have thought about it, and I haven't done it, with one exception, which is a children's story that was published in Texas in 2009. It was called Fenella and the Magic Mirror, and
Okay.
I made an MP4 recording of it, and it takes about 40 minutes. And as luck would have it, just today I asked Anne-Marie if she and the rest of the FBP team would find it amusing, just as a bit of light relief in the middle of what is a very busy time for them.
Yep.
And in response to Anne-Marie's reply, I actually sent it to them. So I hope it will amuse them when they get round to it.
Excellent. Excellent. Is that something you've recorded entirely yourself?
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
Excellent.
Yes, it's Fenella and the Magic Mirror is it's set in romantic medieval times, and it concerns a damsel rescuing a knight in distress.
Okay. Rescue a knight in distress. Excellent. Okay. Right. Yeah. Turn it around a little bit. Yeah. Excellent. That sounds like fun. Walt, I suppose the same question. Audiobooks. Have you thought about that yourself?
No, I really haven't. I'm aware that they exist, and but the question really hasn't come up. I think if Fantastic Books is interested in having that done, we should have a discussion about it. But it's not something I've felt any impetus to pursue. But it might be great. I don't know. I don't know the market that well as they do, obviously, as to
Yeah.
whether it would be something advantageous for them.
Okay, so that's a question that has popped up in the chat. Actually, is are you guys very much in the kind of paperback, strict hardback is where books are at, and you're less bothered about ebooks or things like that. What's your view on the correct format for reading a book? So, fire that at Mark first.
Well, partly because of my age, I like a book
Yep.
up and read by turning the page. But I don't feel any. I don't feel any great preference in principle. I would like books to be out there in whatever medium people find convenient.
Okay.
So
Yep.
I'm very happy about my books appearing as books. It's not my favourite way to read things, but some people like it. I would certainly be up for having my books out as audiobooks if somebody could be found to perform them. I'm not sure I would be the best person for it.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I mean, the thing is with the audio course is it's a lot of work to.
Yes.
We've discussed it on this stream a few times, about it. And the starting premise is that you've already got to have a book ready and sort of done before you even start thinking about the audiobook. So, and then there's a lot more work again to go and create that. So that's a good thing. Walt, what about you? How are you on the spectrum of technology in terms of book delivery and so on and so forth?
Well, I really agree with Mark. I like his statement that whatever the reader prefers, whether it's a paperback or an ebook, is fine, or an audiobook. It's just a question of what the reader prefers. So I have nothing to add to what he said.
Okay, no, that's cool. Cool. Questions come in actually. Okay, actually, oddly enough, a question for me. So it basically says, how do you find your audiobook sell compared to ebook paper books, Drew, or and what does FPB? So actually, I might ask FPB because they're in the chat in a moment about that. I've noticed this in the last last few years, guys. It's been quite interesting for me. Is generally I'm finding that ebooks and audiobooks are slowly overtaking paperbacks. And it seems to be an accelerating trend in the kind of royalty reports and sales figures that I see of my stuff. Now I'm a science fiction and a fantasy author, and that might tend to make my audience a little bit more technically savvy. I don't know, that might be an unfair thing, but I'm definitely seeing that as a sort of trend over time, that ebooks and audiobooks are becoming more and more important in that sort of space. And I'm also seeing a bit of a demographic shift, which I think is probably connected. Obviously with things like COVID and stuff, being able to consume lots and lots of content became quite a thing for people. And I've also seen people like to listen to audiobooks, let's say when they're driving or when they're traveling, or sometimes when they're just kind of hanging around the kitchen doing other things, or working around the house. It seems to be a very easy way to consume content. So I wonder if that's having an impact, particularly for, dare I say it, younger folk. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on those ones, guys. Mark, any thoughts on that in terms of the readership of the age of people?
I think what you said is probably right, Drew, that younger people are preferring other media, but it's not extinguishing the printed book. Elevators are convenient, but they haven't made staircases redundant.
Yeah, no, that's a fair comment. Yep.
So I think they're looking at much the same thing in formats of book production.
Okay, no, that's cool. Walt, any thoughts on that one?
No, nothing to add there.
All makes sense. Excellent. Right, so let's move on a little bit away from formats. I might come back to fantastic books in a minute, so stay in the chat, you guys, and we'll come back there if necessary. Going back now to the creation of a book. Now, I don't know how long your books are. I tend to measure books in word counts because that kind of gives me a frame of reference for how big things are. But in terms of actually sitting down and writing your books, what sort of environment do you find conducive, I suppose, to writing? I mean, do you have to lock yourself away in a small closet with a candle, or do you go to a cafe, or how do you do your writing? Go for Mark first.
Always in my office with my PC.
Right.
That's it. That's where I write. It doesn't stop me getting ideas and information elsewhere. Go to a cafe, listen to a conversation, have a laugh at it, write it down. Think I can use that. Go for a walk in the country, get inspired by the countryside. These are, as a writer, when you're going actually to putting the work together, I need to be there with my computer.
Right. Okay.
So that, a simple answer to that question. Obviously I can expand on the writing process, but that's enough for now.
Okay, that makes sense. So we had a few crackles on your comms there, Mark, but I think we made it through. So basically sitting in front of a laptop or a desktop computer in your office is it's nice and self-contained. Do you have to be does it have to be silent? Do you have to have a do not disturb sign on the door, or is it permissible for other people to come in there and interrupt you, or is that strictly off limits?
I live alone, so it's not a problem.
Okay. That's definitely nice and solitude. Okay, that makes sense. Excellent. Walt, same question to you then. What's your writing environment? What does it feel like to be Walt when he's writing?
Yeah, right now I'm with Mark. I do it on the PC, but the first novel, which turned out to be Everybody Shrugged, was, since I started it back before there were PCs, I used a typewriter.
Okay, excellent.
Smith Corona from from college days, but I had to have, I'm in the room all by myself, no radio, even though as a teenager I couldn't do anything without having the radio on. But by that time I had outgrown that particular need. And with the door closed, and there were days that went by where I never saw my family, and my wife did an excellent job of raising the children, um, although two of them turned out to be lawyers, so I'm not so sure how that's going to play. But anyway, I do like to be left alone when I'm writing. So we have this I guess it's a custom here at our house. When just my wife now, the children are all grown and gone. And if there needs to be an interruption, there'll be a little knock on the door or a of a cleared throat, meaning I need to see you right now about something. Would you please let me interrupt you? And it works fine.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. So, I mean, is it fair to say that your wife, certainly now, I suppose, and your family possibly in previous years, kind of did have to accommodate the writing thing a bit to allow you to get on and create a book?
They did, yes. There
Yep.
was some especially in the earlier years. But now it's not a big deal because the kids are gone.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Presumably your wife's got other interesting things to do, and she can just leave you alone, knowing that you're out of trouble.
Well, she's an artist actually,
Oh, okay. Excellent.
so she spent some time at the with the paintbrush and the easel. And when she first got into that, which was probably 10 or 12 years ago now, it was she fell head over heels in love with that. And and hours would go by where she'd be on one floor of the house doing her thing, and I'd be on another floor of the house doing my writing. Except that I would take a break and come up and shout up the stairs, "Are we going to have dinner tonight?" And so we,
I suppose it's quite good if you've got complementary hobbies like that. That's actually
yeah,
probably
yeah,
quite good, isn't it? Yeah.
it works out quite well.
Excellent. 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 Um, Question going back to Mark then. Question, in terms of writing a book, how do you go about it? Are you a plotter or a pantster, or are describe your sort of writing process a bit? How do you go from idea to starting to get words on the page?
I'm very much a plotter. I don't
Good
have the
man. Good man.
confidence to couldn't. I have to have the whole idea of the book planned out before I start writing.
Okay.
And then when I start writing, the bit that I write first is the last sequence,
Okay.
because then I know what I'm aiming for. Um, of course, I'll change it in drafting, but it has to be there in form to begin with. Uh, uh, but then, of course, go back to the question: well, what starts it all? How do you start the book? An idea comes. Sometimes a what-if question. For instance, I wrote a book called Enklimstad. It's a short novel. It's only just over 60,000. But the what-if question there was, what if it suddenly became impossible to commit a crime or even to conceive of crime? What would become society?
Okay. Yeah, it's quite interesting. You basically come up with a premise and then kind of go from there as an idea.
That's right. And in other cases, something just fascinates you. I mean, when I wrote Parallels 2, which is one of the books being promoted by FBP at the moment. They published it very last year. Uh, I was driven by the fact that I met people who had committed murders, and although they had no doubt at all they had committed the crime, they had no recollection of it.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
And the psychological causes of that just fascinated me.
Yeah.
And that was actually the string of that novel.
Okay. Okay. So it's interesting to see where you get the idea from, but once you've got that, you can kind of roll with it. So have you? Do you? If you're a plotter, I'm a plotter as well. So Plotter's Anonymous, or Plotter's actually not anonymous now, given that everyone knows who we are. Because I also like to work out everything in advance so I know where I'm going. Do you run into when you're writing? Do you run into places where you get stuck, or have you encountered the dreaded writer's block, or is that not something that you've experienced?
I'm not sure that writer's block is a real phenomenon. Certainly, there are bits of writing, always, invariably, I think for all writers, where you get into a really tough bit and you're not quite sure how to get through that. And of course, the simple answer is, well, don't. Just write the next bit and come back. It will sort itself out. So I've never really had a major problem there. What can happen is that when you've got characters who are well developed, they're really well articulated and have a total number of dimensions, they suddenly stop doing what they're told to do.
Yep.
And you just have to accommodate that. I run into that, and I run into it in practically everything I've written. I go for a walk with them and have a chat about it.
Right.
And usually get compromise.
Excellent. Okay, so you actually go for a walk and have them, have a serious one-to-one chat with the characters from your current novel. I love that idea. I think that's excellent.
Some of them are horribly uncommunicative. Just those sorts.
It's just
they're a nuisance, but you've just got to live with it. But that's what they're like, and you say cope with that. Others are far more loquacious. Will answer your questions and explain why they're what they are.
Fantastic.
And you can accommodate.
Excellent. I like the idea of having a conversation with your own character. That's good. Walt, so I suppose the same sort of question to yours. Are you a plotter or a pantster? What's your take on how to create a novel?
I'm not sure I'm in either category because I've done both.
Okay.
The Accidental Spurt was more of a planner. Started with a premise, and I had an outline, and I had little backstories that I'd written separately about the main characters and so on and so forth. Whereas in the Killing O'Carolan, maybe it was because I've had more experience by that time, I didn't outline it so much. But what I find is that sometimes, and I guess I'm kind of agreeing with Mark too about the writer's block, whether it's real. I'll sit down and start writing something, especially dialogue, and if I'm not sure where I'm going, I mean, I have a general idea where I'm going, and who the bad guys are and all that.
Yep.
Although in the case of the Killing O'Carolan, I didn't really know who the bad guy was until quite near the end. He just kind of appeared. But I'll start writing dialogue, and my characters will take the thing off in some direction I hadn't anticipated. And I have to say, well, do I like this or not? And is it moving the story forward in the way that I like? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't.
Right.
In the cases where it isn't, or where I'll get some idea that I'm not sure will fit in, I'll go ahead and write it up and then put it in a file that I call field stones.
Okay. Yep.
And if you know the concept of field stones in New England, there's a very rocky soil, and the farmers would take the stones out of their fields and pile them up and use them for walls and fences and so forth. But the piles were fieldstone piles that could be used for something later. So I have a file of those things, and sometimes they come in handy. And then there's always the option to murder your darlings, which is a phrase that I guess attributed to James Thurber, although maybe others claim it. But you sometimes have to do that too. But taking it out of this particular manuscript doesn't mean it might not fit in some other manuscript somewhere. So it goes into the fieldstones pile.
Okay. I've got a similar thing. I just basically, for every book I write, I have a not used .doc file in my folder, usually in my kind of first draft folder. And anything I write, I've told people on this stream time and time again, never delete anything, because you just never know when you it might come in handy. And I've very rarely gone back to those files, but every so often I have, and I've just pinched little bits out of them in it, possibly sometimes in a separate book. Just you obviously change names and things if necessary. Just because I remember thinking, oh, I wrote that quite cool scene that I never used, and it came in use for the much later date. So I like the idea. I think it's a good one. That's it's don't delete anything. Just your creative stuff is still there in the usage. I think that's quite good.
That's right. And another idea, and I think this maybe goes along with what Mark was talking about, and going and having a conversation with yourself, but it may be a similar effect, is go ahead and write a chapter that's further down
Yep.
in the story. Because once you've written that, then maybe you have a different perspective on what's gone before,
Yep.
and it may all come together in a better way than it would have had you just done it in a linear fashion.
Interesting enough, I've. It's interesting that you guys both say that because I've come to the same conclusion myself. That's a technique that I use when I'm writing. If I do get stuck, and I very rarely get stuck because I've usually plotted things out pretty carefully. I sometimes get demotivated and think, oh, I just can't be bothered to write this at the moment. I'm going to go for a chocolate biscuit, but that's an entirely different problem. But yeah, skipping. Oh, I'm going to go to chapter 11 because a cool thing happens in chapter 11. I want to write that now. I have been suckered into that quite a few times. So I think it's a good thing because then, like you say, you've almost got an anchor point then, haven't you? Which basically says, okay, the characters have got here, therefore they need to get from where they were in chapter 8 to chapter 11. So I need to make sure chapters 10 and 11 make sense. So that's good. Yeah, I think that's a very wholesome way of doing it. I thoroughly recommend that to all the writers on the stream as well, just in case. Right, we have a question come in from Mindwipe. We all three of us have been asked this actually, so we're going to have to take turns. Whom were your inspirations to start writing? So famous authors that you grew up on, or people who inspired you to write. Who's behind your writing? And so feel free to pick anybody. I'm going to go back to Mark on that one first. So Mark, what your inspirations as a writer? What happened?
That is my goodness, that's always the challenging question. The short and extremely unhelpful answer is that I read an awful lot,
Right.
And can be inspired by almost anything. But Lewis Carroll, and as a result of Lewis Carroll, possibly Jasper Fforde. Jasper Fforde was, I previously mentioned National Cake in India. Jasper Fforde was a specific inspiration for that because he also did deliberate genre mixing in his books. But aside from that, I like and get hooked on novels where the English is used beautifully, really well crafted.
Okay, so definitely a craft of the prose, and a sign of a real thought going into the actual manuscript, as it were.
Exactly. Sadly, just over this last week, we have lost our greatest then living writer, Hilary Mantel, and she was born 20 minutes away from where I live.
Oh wow! Okay. Yeah.
And so I do feel a real connection with her, and her. I mean, you read a paragraph of Hilary Mantel, you think, my God, I wish I could write that.
Yeah, that's quite annoying when you read something and think, damn, I'm not that good. Yeah.
At the same time, it's an inspiration. It's inspiration and aspiration.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for.
Okay, now that makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
You really don't try to want to copy the style of someone of that quality. You can't. Really, you want to be a first-rate who you are, not a third-rate Mantel.
Yeah, you've got to stay true to yourself, as it were. Yeah, but you could, so you're sort of you aspire to be, but you're not trying to be. Yeah, yeah. I see. It's a subtle distinction, but I see what you mean. Yeah. Walt, I suppose same question for you then. So who do you have in your mantelpiece of past authors who you've been inspired by?
Well, you're supposed to answer this question by saying Shakespeare, of course, and
Right.
William Faulkner, of course, and Hemingway. But the truth is, it probably started back with a guy named Waddy Piper, who wrote a book called A Little Engine That Could, which was the
Okay.
first book
Yep.
I ever read. But
Right.
to bring it more into the present day, the truth is, there again, it's James Thurber, it's Robert Benchley, it's Woody Allen, it's some of the crime writers that are out there today, Robert Cray, Michael Connolly. Um, I read a ton of science fiction when I was in high school. I couldn't get enough of it,
Yep.
and so some of those authors, Arthur C. Clarke and Heinlein and so on and so forth, were influential as well in terms of how do you structure a story and all that. Though I wasn't thinking in those terms while reading, but I was absorbing all this stuff
Yeah.
and find that it comes out in the writing.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, you do pick these sort of things up. I mean, mine is. I mean, I suppose I'm. Dare I say it, slightly more genre specific than you guys are, and that's it's not because um, that I'm deliberately trying to be genre-y, but because I am actually quite anti-genre-y, but fantasy and science fiction is where I kind of live. So mine, you will be not at all surprised that I share the Clark and I share the Heinlein, the Asimov sort of stuff in there as well. I suppose the one book or the one author who really woke me up to the idea of writing and kind of changed my view of things was Anne McCaffrey, who wrote the Dragon series of books, which are um, probably I would kind of hope the closest thing to kind of the stuff that I do nowadays, which is it's a fantasy stroke planetary romance kind of a thing going on, but with some quite good scientific principles in the background. So I would definitely count Anne McCaffrey as one of my inspirations, as somebody who's able to write a very compelling fantasy style story, but with a scientific underpinning that makes sense. So I took that as very much an inspiration. And the one thing I particularly liked about her was that her characters seemed to be really interesting people. So if I was to critique Clarke and Asimov in a science fiction vein, I would say that their characters are quite weak, and they spend all their time doing quite big scientific things about the rockets or the planetary this, that, and the other, and all the scientific stuff, which makes a hard science fiction novel very interesting to read. But their characters are very much, they're either professional people or they're kind of very important people who just cite things and go on to do important stuff, but you don't really find out a great deal about who they are as individuals. Whereas Anne McCaffrey was the sort of author who basically fleshed out what the person was like, and you saw her characters under duress, and you saw them short-tempered and annoyed, and and at the end of their tether. And sometimes they would be nice and sensible, and other times they would be emotionally overwrought and prone to sort of lashing out at friends and people around them, which made them feel more like people, which I've picked up as a thing that I like to do in my novels. So I try and make my characters very, very flawed, but basically either kind of okay or not okay, or ambiguous, so that the reader isn't quite sure, is this the good guy or the bad guy or somewhere in between. That's something I definitely kind of aim for, I think.
That was one of the things that I noticed in your Shade Word series,
Yeah,
uh,
I like that.
because I found myself on one page rooting for this guy or this group of people, and then
Yeah.
3 pages later I'm rooting for somebody else, and and it all worked out in the end, and it was very well done.
Yep. Well, that's encouraging, because that's exactly the thing that I was aiming for. To be honest, is that I was trying to make the reader realise that evil or good is almost a perspective, and because in real life nobody thinks they're the bad guy, right? It's just nobody sets out to say, right, I'm going to be an evil megalomaniac. Or maybe they do, but most people think they're doing the right thing, but they end up in conflict anyway because maybe they've got conflicting goals or conflicting worldviews, all those sort of things. And I was trying to take some people and put them into a situation where there was some huge conflict between them, but they were both good guys from their own perspective, and that was something I was trying quite hard to do with the Shape with.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. Okay, so brilliant. Right. Okay, so onwards to the next sort of question. So let's talk a little bit about the whole process of getting into fantastic books publishing themselves. So before fantastic books, what sort of routes to getting published had you guys sort of thought about? Had you looked at self-publishing, or had you gone through traditional publishing? What was your approach, and what were you hoping to achieve? As you get to the point of thinking, I'm going to write a book, therefore I need to publish it in some fashion. Mark, if I could go to you first on that one.
Yeah, I tried my hand at short stories, and finally got one or two published in magazines, and then rather unusually, my first published book was a collection of short stories. It was published in Canada.
Okay.
And I wrote a rather. It wasn't a very good novel, but it got published in the States in 20. Various reasons, I was looking after my mother. She became. It was round the clock care, and I had to run a household too. And for a long time, I actually didn't write anything.
Okay.
And then I had to try to pull myself together again, joining writing groups and so forth. I was in touch with a writer, Australian, Boris Glickman, who writes very intriguing short fantasy and science fiction stories. I exchanged emails with him, and I discovered that he had published fantastic books, publishing,
Okay.
I think, as contribution to anthologies. And I was looking for someone to publish something of mine. I asked Boris, got on with him, he spoke very warmly of it. There was a competition going, and I put a short for it, not a very good, to be honest.
Right.
But it apparently good enough because it was anthologized. And with the foot in the door, I then approached FBP with my appalling collection of poems in poetry and prose.
Right. Okay.
And I accepted that, and it still has the capacity to make people groan, and some of the puns have led me to death threats. They're so bad. And that really got me established. Since then, almost everything I've written has been by FBP.
Right. Okay.
I have actually, here's me being genre specific, I have actually written a historical novel which is with a different publisher and is allegedly about to appear. They're happy with everything, and they've got a cover that they like, and I don't.
Okay. Yep.
But otherwise, I'm very happy with FBP. You feel welcome, you feel a family.
Excellent. Yeah.
I think about a small publishing house. Believe me, I publish the big ones, and it's not as much fun. I've never personally gone down the self-publishing route.
Okay.
A lot of my friends and fellow authors have done so and had a success at it, and good luck to them. But I'm too lazy.
Fair enough. Yep.
Doing all the production stuff myself, and I'd rather have publishers who know what they do and actually take it on.
Makes sense. Okay, that's great. Walt, I suppose the same question to you. What sort of publishing routes have you explored before FBP, and what led you to them? How did you get involved?
Actually, back when I was still working, but more after I retired, I would send short stories off to magazines and so forth. And I had, some luck with that, a handful of publications, but it was very frustrating. The rejection slips, I could have papered my walls with them. They used to actually come on paper instead of just emails. But um, and the first book that I had published, as I mentioned, it's called The Fivefold Effect. It's a book about leadership based on some biblical principles.
Okay.
And I tried to get some of the traditional Christian publishers interested in it, and one or two of them were. But like I said, they had a problem with the genre. What is this book about? And so I ended up self-publishing and went that route. But as far as the fiction is concerned, the way that came about, the breakthrough came about, was I was taking a writing course that was sponsored by the local writers group here in Greensboro, and I wrote a short science fiction story that the facilitator, the moderator of the class, thought was pretty good, and he gave me a couple of tips, and I sharpened it up, and I found out through the North Carolina Writers Network that I also belong to that FPB was having a contest for charity to
Yep.
do an anthology uh, of science fiction. And of course, I knew that they had a bent towards science fiction. So I thought, well, I'll just enter this thing. So I did, and lo and behold, they accepted it for the publication. The publication is called Fusion. I think I know it's still available.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, I think I've got a story in that one as well, as I recall. So
That's
that's
right.
cool. Yep.
Yeah. So I was in that, and that began a relationship, at least between me and Dan Grubb, the CEO of the outfit. And then my next idea was, gee, I wonder if I could pull together a collection of short stories and poems and things that I've written over the years and polish them up and bring them up to current, 21st century language and technology and so forth, and put a few cell phones in there and whatnot that,
Yeah.
that didn't exist when I originally wrote some of them, and put that together, and maybe FPB would be interested in that. So I did, and I sent it off, and they were interested, and they helped me a great deal in terms of how to organize it to make it more professional looking than I knew how to do. And lo and behold, they published it as On Shallowed Ground, and we went from there.
Excellent. Okay. Excellent.
But the other books, I sent out letters to a countless number of agents and so forth, because you really have to go through an agent to get to some of the traditional publishers and so
Yeah,
on
sure.
and so forth.
Yep.
That was a very, very frustrating experience. So again, I so much appreciate FPB for the way that they have, like I said, taken a chance on me.
Excellent. Well, there you go. It's a good thumbs up for FPB on there. So there we go. Well done, guys. Okay, so winding back a little bit. Then, I mean, the satire seems to be a common theme for both of you. But what is there a message behind your writing? Is there something that is, do you feel that you need to advise the world of your great expertise and great wisdom now that you've reached your September? Is there some, would you have a political or religious message that you're trying to put across in your writing, or do you have nothing at all and it's just for fun? I mean, have you guys got, is there any subtext that we should know about that you put into your stories? Question for Mark first. I think have a go at that one.
Yes, thank you, Drew. May I say, incidentally, that I'm missing a lot of what Walt is saying, and it's silence for me.
Apologies. We're having there's a slight crackle on the stream. I'm not quite getting you all clearly all the time either, Mark, I'm afraid, but most of the time I think it's okay. So I think it will probably come across in the final video okay, but we have noticed a few issues, so apologies for that. I'm not quite sure what's causing it, but crack on, and we'll do our best to keep the audio issues out of the way.
All right. Okay. Well, to your question, first and foremost, when I write a novel, I've got to think of the reader, and the reader does not want to be preached to. The reader wants to be entertained.
Right.
And entertained in a very broad sense. They may want some excitement. They might want something that's consoling. They might just want something that grips them because they get engaged with the characters or whatever. But
Yep.
To involve the reader and not preach at them. So really, if there are messages there or questions that I want to raise, they are subtle. They're left um, pretty much in the background.
Okay.
And
Yep.
people read the story and never really think any more deeply about it. That's fine by me. To one, let me give you a specific example, Drew. Um, Perry Last 2, which is the novel, is about really focused on about people committing crimes and not being able to remember them.
Yep.
Um, uh, there is, I tackle the question of the relationship between creator and created in there. Really, I'm thinking at the artistic point of view. When we're writing, things don't always go quite as we plan them, so because the characters do their own thing.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
And to what extent does the creator have control over the creation? Now, you can, if you wish, see theological connotations there, and in order just to suggest that, I introduced a clergyman into the story who actually discusses this question with the protagonist. But other things are going on at the same time, and if the reader just glosses over that, that's fine.
Yeah.
Some might pick it up and be entertained by it, which is fine. That really is where I'm at with that. Yes, of course, when I'm writing stories, there are things, big questions that occur in my head. And in a sense, I'm working them out as best I can as I write the story, but I certainly don't ever want them to get in the way of the reader.
Yeah. Yeah. So your kind of view on it is that if the reader starts thinking about big questions or big issues or anything like that, then that's almost them finding that themselves, kind of
Sure.
alongside your novel, rather than you've specifically said, right, you need to think about this, and here's the meaning of the. So you don't have a section at the end of the book is like some of the kids' TV shows of my youth, where today's lesson, kids, is this is what you're supposed to have learned from this 20-minute cartoon. Yeah.
The story is, it's quite so. Yeah, no,
Not doing that. Excellent. Okay, Walt. Same sort of question, I suppose. So have you got? Is there anything lurking behind your writing in terms of, some accumulated wisdom of the ages that you might be trying to put across in what you write?
I think there probably is, but I'm not blatant about it. The obvious one is that don't take yourself too seriously, of course. But as you read the books, I'm very conservative socially and politically, but I don't want any political stuff in the book per se.
Yeah.
Nor do I want a whole lot of violence and so on and so forth. I mean, you may notice that in the two detective stories, there's only one person that's ever died, and he died before the book began.
Right.
So even though it was a pretty horrible death, but still, I didn't have to go through that. But my character, my protagonist, is kind of an average a guy. He and his wife go to church. They have conservative values, what I call the kind of values that I grew up with back in the 50s and 60s in America.
Yep.
And the other characters do not conflict with those values. They believe in the difference between right and wrong, and they're fairly objective in the way they look at things. And so if it's not really so much a message as it is a feeling that you might get by reading the book, that about this particular world that I've created is kind of a nice place, even though bad things happen. And it's a fun place to be, and gosh, I don't have to worry about too much about getting involved in some of the more controversial, or how do you all pronounce that word differently, but
Yeah.
things.
Controversial is fine. We'll get there.
You get it. Okay,
Yep.
good. And It's so I guess I'll leave it at that. If you
Yeah,
come
no,
away with
yeah,
a feeling of greater comfort with a conservative viewpoint, then good. But I'm not really trying to do that as a campaign or a crusade or anything like that. It's just the way I am and the way I write.
yeah, yeah. No, I get where you guys are coming from entirely. I've actually put a little note on my blog, on my about page on my website, which basically says, yeah, I'm here to entertain you guys. Okay, don't read any politics into my books. It's there isn't anything there. I'm not trying to preach. I completely agree with Walt's statement there that that's not yeah. Some writers will do that. I think there are plenty of books with a strong, let's say, environmental message, or a strong political message, or a strong social, political, or even religious message. I possibly similar to you, I will pick up things like religion, politics, and social problems, and geopolitical problems, whatever they happen to be. They're the sort of things that would happen in any other universe, right? Because it's at the end of the day, it's just people organising themselves and coming into conflict. But what the society problems that I put in my book, but in my books, my stories, are not connected to the real world in the sense that when they did the thing in the book, that was a clear reference to the miners' strike in the 70s for those of us in the UK. It isn't. It's nothing like that. Although obviously political events do influence us and give us thoughts and possibly ideas. I have had, I don't know if this has happened to you guys. I have had a few emails, however, from people who've read my stuff saying, "Thank you very much. The way you handled Chapter 8 was an amazing commentary on the Aldovian people's struggle for independence," or something. And I've read these emails and I've gone, okay, I'm not quite sure how to answer this. Because somebody has clearly read something into my books which I didn't put there, I'm always a bit bemused as to how to answer emails like that. I usually answer them with thanks, yeah, it's great, glad you picked up on it, kind of thing. But I'm not really sure. I feel a bit guilty. Have you guys had odd emails back from readers in similar kind of guises? Walt, I'll go back to you first on that one.
No, nothing like that. I think most of my readers that correspond with me get it.
Right,
So
excellent.
I haven't had any of
This is
those.
satire. Okay, yeah, yeah. Okay. Mark, anything from you in that kind of vein?
Yes, you do get some oddities, don't you? Um, Again, with reference to Parallels 2, that it's a novel within a novel.
Yep.
The protagonist is a crime writer and he's writing a crime novel, and at the end of the book you get the solution to the who done it, and you also get the answer to the big question over that's driven the novel along. And I've had writers who've come back to people writing to me and saying how much they enjoyed the who done it and hadn't spotted the solution. They haven't even seen the outer story. They've only seen
No
the
way.
novel in the so
Yeah.
I find that actually it surprised me a little. And yes, I've had one or two things that have been completely misinterpreted. National Cake Day in Mauritania, I got some real flack for that,
Right.
for writing anti-government propaganda.
Oh, ow. Yes, nice. Okay. It's funny how people will pick up on things like that. If it's quite sensitive, I think that's quite interesting. It possibly says more about the readers than it does about the writers, but I think that's quite interesting.
Yes. Okay.
On that,
Can I just
yeah,
add one?
go for it, Will.
I guess my book, Everybody Shrugged, is a juxtaposition of the military, which of course uses very harmful substances, versus some I guess ecological people who are concerned about using harmful substances. And this is so I'm contrasting the military with with academic in that way, and making total fun of the government overreach. But
Yep.
it's done in such an absurd way that I don't see how anybody could take offense at it.
So you'll have offended somebody somewhere, Walt. I'm sure it's inevitable nowadays.
Well, they haven't had the temerity to
To actually
contact me.
contact you. Okay, let's go. Okay, so that's cool. I mean, I must admit, I pick up. I mean, I've had accusations that I'm preaching about global warming because of what I've written in Shapewood, and I said, well, no, I'm not. What I've extrapolated in Shapewood was that we didn't get to grips with global warming and had to evacuate the planet. That doesn't make me into an evangelist for or against global warming or any of the solutions or problems therein. It just means I've taken that idea and I've gone, let's assume it gets worse and we don't fix it. That's basically my premise. And we've had to evacuate, and I've just gone with that as a tangent. It's the same with I've had if you've read Shapewood, you'll know that there's basically a cult of highly privileged women in the story, basically known as the priestesses. And they have what appear to be some sort of magical powers, and I've been accused of I've had people contact me basically saying, yes, well, yeah, so what you're trying to do is you're trying to undermine male superiority, things like this. And I've kind of read these emails thinking, what are they talking about? It's amazing that the lengths people will go to drive some their kind of worldviews and see it reflected in literature. I've just been quite mind boggled by some of the emails I've had. It feels like Shapewood touched a few unintentionally from my perspective, but it touched a few nerves in terms of current social issues, current geopolitical issues that I certainly used as, I suppose, what ifs, but I certainly didn't try and state a position on them through the construction of a fictional novel. It very much wasn't my intention. So it was interesting to see if that's just how people perceive things. It's quite weird. But there we go. Right. So another question for you then. So you get the book out there, you've published it, it's out there in the real world, and people start buying it, and still people start reading it. So then we get to the subject of sort of the feedback on the book and getting reviews like that. Now, here's a difficult question. Have you had a bad review, like a 1-star or a 2-star review, and what was the review about? And what did you make of it as a piece of feedback? I'll go to Mark first on that one.
Yeah, we all have bad reviews. It's lovely to get the good ones. And in fact, as I have been doing recently, you can take a good review and copy it and send it to your friends and say, "Look at this! Isn't it marvelous?" And now are you going to buy the book for me?
Exactly.
But as I tell my students, don't ever worry about a bad review, because if you go to one of the really great authors, look at Booker Prize winners, look at Nobel Prize winners, look at Ishiguro, Mantell, Barnes, all our top authors. I'm saying any one of their books that's been well celebrated and has got an award, and look at the reviews on, say, Amazon or Goodreads. And yes, you'll get 5-star reviews of people raving about it. Somewhere down the line, there'll be some 1- and 2-star reviews where people just didn't like it.
Yep.
Now, if they can get bad reviews, so can the rest of us.
I suppose that's fair enough. Yep.
Yeah. So, I try to apply that to myself.
Have you had Mark? Have you had 1-star reviews that you've read and you've gone, I think that's a fair review, i.e. the person didn't like it or the criticisms they came up with were valid, even if you didn't agree with them, or have you had the sort of 1-star reviews that you just get, this is rubbish? There's no kind of commentary, so there's no way you could interpret what went wrong. What sort of bad reviews have you had?
Well, mostly it's people just saying they don't like it. Well, fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, there are fine books out there, very good books that I read and I don't like.
Yep.
You know, and you know, so I get a book out there, and some people enjoy it and like it, and some people don't. Well, that's books.
Yeah, I think that's fair
Yeah.
enough, isn't it? Yeah, you could not like something. So and I think some people interpret the stars. Yeah, I mean Amazon does it 1 to 5, doesn't it? I think Goodreads do 1 to 5 as well, possibly. I think what does a 1 star review mean? I mean you can not like something and still appreciate it as a piece of work, can't you? Is that what a 1 star review means? But I think the criteria sometimes is a bit vague, isn't it?
They're very subjective, of course. Those criteria.
Yep.
There are no fixed rules about how many stars you attach to a particular evaluation. Personally, if I'm reviewing a book and I don't like it, I don't feel it works, but I can see what the author was doing, and I can admire some of the technique in it.
Yep.
That what they were doing was done well. I just didn't like what they were doing.
Yeah. Yep.
I'll give it 3 stars.
Yeah.
And I, a halfway review, and I'll explain why the 3 stars. There's a lot to be praised here, but I didn't like it because, and spell that out, and that justifies it. I would only give a 1 or 2 star review to a book that I thought really was ill-conceived, ill-written, and frankly wasn't worth publishing.
Shouldn't be there in the first place. Yeah. Okay, that's good. I suppose Walt, sort of same question. So, have you been in receipt of a bad review, and how did you interpret it?
Well, first of all, I agree completely with Mark's philosophy on this. I think he articulated it quite well. And no, I have not had a bad review, but it occurs to me that I should probably get one of my friends to go write one, give me a 1 star review, just so I'll be in better company.
Oh, so you're at the moment you're an author of such great renown that you don't have any negative reviews. I mean, there you go. I think I would go with that. That's what I would go with. I once had I've still got it. It's on Amazon somewhere. I can't remember which book it was now, but I had a 1 star review for one of my books. And I remember thinking, why have I got it? Because it was my first ever 1 star review, I think. I got kind of mostly 4 stars and 5 stars for the book. And I was fairly happy with that. Suddenly this 1 star review comes up. So I was like, what? You're reducing my average down to like 3.5 stars or something now. And I looked up this review and read it. And it basically said, book turned up late.
Oh, I've seen that. It's not
I was like, that's not fair. What did you expect the author to do? So my average was badly reduced because Amazon presumably screwed something up. But I got the blame. So hey, what can you do? But it's very. I mean, it's a bit of potluck, isn't it? I mean, there is that sense, I suppose. You put, you're putting your book out there, and it's quite a scary moment, isn't it? I think particularly. I mean, I'm kind of used to it now after having written several books, but particularly in the earlier days, putting a book out there and going, well, now the public's got hold of it. Maybe they're going to shoot me down. Maybe I can't write. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. The whole imposter syndrome sort of thing happens. Is that something that you guys sort of experienced early on in terms of, oh my God, what are people going to think of my stuff? Was that a big fear early on? I'll start with Mark again on that one.
I don't think I was a bit anxious about it. I wouldn't say I was fearful, but it's kind of like your kids leaving home, isn't it? You've done your best. They're out there now. They've got to look after themselves.
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah.
Launching a book is it's very much the same sort of phenomenon. You think of your books as your babies, and you're very protective of them and all the rest of it. But in the end, they've got to stand up for themselves.
That's quite a good way of looking at it. I quite like that actually. Yeah, because they are a thing, aren't they? And they have to kind of live and die on their own merits, I suppose, as other people perceive them. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, interesting. Walt, what do you think? I mean, what was your thinking on? And as you first became a published author, I suppose.
Well, you go through several stages when you're writing a book, and toward the end before publication, and one of them is you have a stable of first readers, or sometimes they're called something else, but beta readers or something.
Yeah.
So, and even though they're your friends and you expect them to say good things, sometimes you will get good objective criticism that needs to be reflected in a rewrite or revisions of the book. And so you go through that process, and that builds your confidence. So, okay, these people now think this is a pretty good book. And then the very fact that a publisher like FPB has decided to publish it says an awful lot about it, because they have high standards.
Yep.
And so I've really never had much of a worry about it once it's launched. Is what are people going to think? I don't know exactly what they're going to think, but I don't think they're going to think ill of it.
Okay, so that's a very chilled, relaxed view. I like that. Very good, very good. In terms of obviously the process that FPB goes through in terms of they take your manuscript. I mean, they certainly took my manuscript, and then certainly in one of my earlier books, you get back your manuscript back from one of their their editors that shall not be named. I've got a lovely editor that that FPB puts me in touch with. Of course, I don't know who she is. All I know is that she's a she, but I don't know who she is. So I've called her May, which stands for Mysterious Anomalous Editor. So I now have a nickname for my editor at FPB, but the process of editing. What do you guys made of that? Because certainly when I first got edited, obviously, I sent my manuscript in, and it was literally perfect, word for word all the way through. There were no errors in it or any improvements that could be made to it whatsoever. And I was quite surprised when it came back, and the editor had the temerity to adjust things in my amazing prose. But adjust they did, and actually having read through the suggested amendments, I actually found that they were quite good. And I was quite surprised, I suppose, by how much work I still had to do at that stage. So did you have a similar experience with editing, or was it plain sailing for you? Go for Mark.
It never troubled me. I expected some critical feedback. I'm an editor as well as a writer.
Oh, okay. Right. So you've got some experience in the whole thing, yeah.
I'm accustomed to looking at text and saying, "Yep, this is pretty good, but this bit here really doesn't work as it should, and that really needs to be adjusted," and so forth. You've given feedback that's helpful, positive, but don't let people get away with anything.
Yeah.
One thing I think we've all done, I'm sure Walt would agree, and I'm sure you would agree with me, Drew, with your experience, is that however good we are at editing other people's work, we can never be perfect at editing our own.
No, that's very true, yeah.
Yes.
And we really do need the feedback. We need a good beta reader, we need good editors. And without those, we're not going to get our books into the form we want them in. It's very unfortunate when people get critical feedback and are prima donnas about it and have tantrums and refuse to change anything.
Yep.
It's extremely stupid, because publishers, editors know what they're doing. Publishers know what sells better than authors do. And if you're getting guidance that to make adjustments and improve things from a publisher's point of view, you're pretty stupid if you don't follow it.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got experts, then it's a good idea to listen to their opinions. There's a lovely thing I've seen on it's a spoof of every sort of science fiction / fantasy film there's ever been, which is slightly tangential to this, but it'll make sense at the moment. Is there's this evil overlord list, which is basically a list of all of the things that the top baddies in all space kind of movies get wrong all the time. And number 8 on the list is, I shall employ some minions, and when I ask them for advice, I shall listen to what they say. It's like, the baddies never do that. No, I know what I'm doing. And I think it's good advice. So that I can if you've got like half an hour over a cup of tea, I can thoroughly recommend you looking up the Evil Overlord list It's basically all the things that evil overlords shouldn't or should do, based on all the perceived failures in all of the different films. So that's definitely worth a peruse.
I like that.
Walt, yeah, I suppose sort of same question in your direction. What do you think? Editing wise.
Again, I agree with Mark. I found the editorial process at FPB was outstanding. They caught some things that I had missed, but the kinds of things that they found or commented on were things that I really needed to think about. And if I made the changes that they suggested, and actually I didn't have to make the changes because they're very uh, free about letting the authors decide, make the final decision about what's going to go in the book. By that point, I guess maybe some cases where that's not true, but in my case, I felt that it was. But there were only one or two instances where I disagreed with the comment that the editor made, and I wrote back and said, "Here's why I disagree, and or here's what I had in mind, and perhaps I didn't set it up properly, so I'll go back and set it up,
telegraph it a bit more clearly,
and kind of eliminate the issue." So it all worked out very well, and I tell you what, I learned a lot from the process in the case of every one of the books.
I would agree. I learned a huge amount because one of the biggest things that the editors picked me up on was, if you're going to have this happen to this character at this point in the story, there needs to be some sort of preamble to that event that basically gives the reader a good reason to go, oh, okay, hang on, that's being resolved now, is it? Or that's being highlighted, or that's being accelerated, or something like that. You've got to have connections across your chapters to go, okay, well that's important because there's this thing that happened earlier. Okay, and connecting all those things up. So I learned a lot about structuring and things from the editing comments. I think that's very good. And Alan on the chat basically also says he's found the editing process very, very useful. So that's good. I think it's a very positive thing. And it's good that the author gets the final say, but you're wise, I think, if you pay close attention to the editing comments. I think it definitely. The guys at FPP have told me you can. They can't work a miracle with editing, but they can polish things up to a nice shine. I think that's. I think that's the aim. That's the aim behind editing. I think it improves what's already there. So which is really good.
I agree with.
Sorry, Mark. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, editors are not. When you're an editor, you're not an author.
Yes.
You're serving the author's best interests. You don't change the author's voice, and you don't change the author's intentions. What you do is to bring it out to best advantage.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that FBP's editors would agree exactly with that. But sometimes editors can help us to eliminate terrible blunders.
Yes.
Martin Amis once told me that he'd submitted a manuscript of a novel. I can't remember which novel it was, but the publisher's editor came back to him and said that on page 263 a character appeared who had died 100 pages earlier, and this was really that wasn't working too well.
Yeah. That's not going to work, is it? I've done that because that's the danger, I think, of sometimes skipping ahead a chapter or two when you're writing, is that you might introduce an inadvertent continuity error because you've forgotten who's still alive. I suppose that's a fairly extreme example, but I've certainly done situations where I've jumped ahead a few paragraphs, and the editors picked me up on saying this character sat down twice, or this character unsheathed their sword, but their sword's already on the table. How did they manage that? Little things like that, which would quite badly screw up the scene if they weren't solved. And he's like, oh, oops, yeah, they can't sit down twice. That's just daft. And it's funny, like you say, how you don't spot these things yourself. Sometimes it's very hard to see them, because you know what's happening in the scene, so you skip over all the errors because you know already what's going on. It's in your mind, I suppose. A third pair of eyes that's quite objective is a good thing.
Yeah. Yes.
So another question for you guys. So we're getting towards the end of the interview now, so I shall let you go away before too long and have a nice refreshing cup of tea or whatever it is that takes your fancy. But Talk to me a little bit about marketing. Now, this is a horrible part of or at least I think it's a horrible part of the whole author process. What do you guys do to kind of get the word out about your books? What sort of techniques have you employed? I'll go to Mark again for this one.
Okay. I am associated with a couple of writing groups, and well, 3 writing groups really, and I've got my students. And then, of course, I've got connections with a lot of other authors through, for example, the Society of Authors.
Okay.
So I have a network of people out there to whom I can alert with news of something that I've just published,
Yep.
or is about to be published, and they similarly can alert me. So that's one way in which I get things out. Then you can go to open mic sessions, spoken word sessions, and read excerpts, and brandish copies of the book and say,
Yep.
available a surprisingly low price of whatever. That's more or less how I go about it.
Okay. Yep.
I don't push any more than that. The lovely thing is that, of course, FBP and publishers in general will do their own marketing as well.
Yeah.
And that does help us. But it is very important to do it, because you can't rely on the publisher to do all your marketing for you. You've got to pull your weight.
Yes. Yeah. You've got to do things and stand out a little bit. Yep.
I agree with you, Drew. It's not the most fun part of the job, but it is part of the job.
It is, and it is a job. I think that's another thing. I mean, it's fun, but it's still a piece of work, isn't it? It's a piece of professionalism that you have to get up and write and get up and market and get up and edit and get up and redraft and stuff. You still got to have a work ethic about the whole writing process.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah. And it's hard sometimes. It is hard. Yeah. Walt, I suppose the same question to you. So, marketing. What do you do to market yourself and your books?
Well, I guess similar to some of the things that Mark does, but I'm on LinkedIn, and so I'll put an announcement there, and maybe some of the special interest groups that are on there. Facebook, of course, and a number of special groups there. I have a page for each of my books, and so I'll be sharing among those. I have an email contact list of several hundred people, and so periodically they'll get an email from me about it. So that's really the pretty much the extent of it.
Yep.
Unfortunately, in my generation, and I'm sure it's not true of all of us, but didn't grow up with social media, and I'm a kind of a dinosaur in that respect. don't really understand how all that works.
Yep.
I mean, on one level I do, of course, but I don't have something like you have here. There's a following with a blog or a podcast or something like that, because it just always seemed to me to be a little bit more labor intensive than I was willing to do. But that could have been a mistake. I don't know. But
Yeah,
how to build up a following of several thousand people online is something that I've never really known how to pursue.
Yeah, it's I mean, I've using social media in many different guises. Primarily, I suppose, actually not really in terms of marketing, because it's more almost joining the social media platforms for the purpose of the social media platforms. What I find most useful about it is I can connect with lots and lots of different people, across the world, across different interest groups that I'm interested in. And I get to know people and have chats with people, and then I didn't realize you were an author. What have you written? Kind of comes up. So it's almost tangential. It's not kind of marketing. It's more being social, and then it just allows me to widen my circle of kind of friends and acquaintances online to people across the world who I'd never otherwise be able to meet, and just have conversations. And most of it is having conversations with like-minded people, or at least people who share some interests. And then when they discover I'm an author, the obvious question is, have you written a book? Well, surprisingly enough, yes, I have. And you can find it online. Here's the link, if you're interested. And so it's not sort of market. It's not sort of social media for the perspective of marketing. It's almost marketing becomes an accidental thing out of it. And I hope that most people who follow my kind of Twitch streams and my Twitter and things like that are mostly in it for, you know, having a bit of a, you know, amusing chat with me, rather than it's got anything particular to do with the book. And I think the books hopefully are somewhat slightly tangential to that, but that's social media. But I completely get that, you know, we have to do specific marketing as well, and I like going along to, you know, conventions and shows and you know, and all, you know, all the things like mailing lists I think are all good ideas and stuff. But it's time consuming. You're absolutely right. You know, there's a lot of time and effort that needs to go into that to kind of raise your profile, and of course everybody else is trying to do the same thing at the same time, all the other authors that are out there. So it's it is difficult, because, you know, the amount of time you know, at the end of the day you still got to write some books as well. So you know, you've got to find time for all of those things. I think it's a very complicated topic. So yeah, good stuff. Right, so as we kind of wrap up, you know, question, I suppose, you know, what for both of you, what are you going to do next? What's the next stage in your writing thing? Yeah, have you got another book on the way, that kind of thing? Or, you know, and where would you like to be in a few years' time? What would success, what would a big success look like to you? What would you hand on heart, what would you like to achieve with your writing career? So I'll go to Mark first with that one. That's quite a big question, so let's see what he makes of that.
It would be very nice to get one of the big awards. I don't think I ever will, because I don't think I write the right sort of books, but that would be a lovely thing to have in a few years' time.
Yep.
However, what I'm doing at the moment is another what if book. I wrote the dreadful first draft, and it is 123,000 words. It will come down to less than it will come down to less than 100,000 when I finished with it. But it's the what if question is suppose the heroine and hero, the stereotypical heroine and hero of a Mills and Boon romance,
right,
were real. What sort of backstories, what sort of histories would make them the way they are?
Okay, yeah.
And then what would happen when they got together? That's not going to be happily ever after, because your stereotypical Mills and Boon hero, for a start, being the alpha male, is next door to a psychopath. So,
excellent.
You know, so anyway, there I am. That's what I'm working on, the deconstruct Mills and Boon romance.
Excellent. Okay, that's sort of anti-romance novel. I like it. Yeah, that sounds fun. Walt, what about you? What have you got planned next, and where would you like to be in terms of your kind of writing career?
To answer the first part of the question, I have beginning to get some ideas about what the next adventure for Mark Fairley, my reluctant amateur detective, might get himself into.
Okay.
So a few things are coming to me. I haven't actually sat down and started writing any of it yet, but I can see that that's going to happen. And then the answer to the larger question, I would love for all of these books to be made into movies.
Okay.
And I haven't a clue as to how to go about that, but that would be to me that would be the ultimate of authorship success. We had I'm sure you've heard of Orson Scott Card, mm-hmm. The Ender series is his probably most famous work. He actually lived in the neighborhood that we lived in when we were before we moved to where we are now. I met him only once, but he's been an inspiration in terms of the success that he's had.
Okay, that's quite nice. I think a lot of writers would love to see their stories, you know, put on the big screen or even the small screen as maybe a TV series. So I can see myself, you know, quite liking that idea as well. I think that would appeal to me. I would be a bit concerned as to how it would be done. And I have had a chat with a few kind of TV types on the stream in the past who basically said the last thing that the TV executives or the film executives want is a writer who wants to basically say, no, it should be this way. So so it's a word of caution. Once you get to the point where the film or the TV folks are interested in it, you've kind of got to give it up and leave it to them to produce it, because it's probably not our area of expertise. But part of me thinks basically I would absolutely love that. The other part of me goes, what would they do with my book if they turned it into a film, and would I be happy with it? Because there have been some quite atrocious translations of books to film, but there have been some very, very good ones as well. So hoping you get a good one, I suppose, is the risk there. But if somebody basically said, here's $2 million for the rights to Shapewood, I think I'd probably say yes. I'm fairly sure I would. And they can do what the heck they like with it, I suspect, because I could go off and lie on the beach somewhere. But I don't know. I mean, what do you think of that, Walt, in terms of the creative changes that might happen to your stories if they were turned into a film or a TV series?
I have actually thought about that, and frankly, I guess I've just decided that if it were to happen, I wouldn't worry too much about it.
I think that's probably the wisest thing to do. Actually, I think at the end of the day, that makes kind of sense. Fantastic stuff. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining me for this interview. Really appreciate the time taken out. I hope you found it fun and interesting. I've certainly taken a few notes and things. It's been quite enlightening for me as well, so that's been really, really good. So I'll give you 30 seconds. Have you got any kind of words of wisdom, strange anecdotes, anything else that you'd like to chuck in for our viewers and listeners right at the end here, just as final words for the interview? It could be anything you like, so just far away. So while you're thinking about what am I going to say, Drew's put me totally on the spot. I'd just like to say a big thanks to everybody in the chat who's been along with us. Thank you very much, obviously, to FPP for their MABLE event, which continues all the way through September and into October as well. A variety of books being launched. I'm doing a series of interviews with various different authors who are launching books, so there's plenty to kind of get stuck into. I'm sure somebody from FPP will stick a link in the chat in a moment to where you can find the rest of the schedule of events that are going on. There are there's a bunch of kind of YouTube links and videos and all sorts of stuff that are going on there as well. So feel free to click on that. I'm sure it will appear in a moment. Click on that link when it appears. I've now worried Anne-Marie. I put her on the spot as well. That's what I do. Yeah, got to keep people on their toes. Lots of other content going on for MABLE, which stands for, I think, Massive Autumn Book Launch Event, if I've got that correct. So that's really, really good. And lots of other authors. So I've got more authors coming onto the stream next week, and we'll crack on with all that sort of fun. Always good to chat to other people who are writing and seeing what they do. But if I can go back to my authors tonight. So Mark, any last words of wisdom for the internet at large from you?
Well, I'm never wise, Drew. But let me say, first of all, thank you very much for organising this and giving up your time, and also to the people who've been on the chat for giving up their time to listen.
That's what...
As for advice to authors, just one thing I would say: don't give up.
Right. Very
Keep
good
at
advice. Yep. I like that. That's short and very succinct, Mark. Yeah, and it's very good, because it's sometimes quite a slog to to just keep going and persevere and believe in yourself and believe in the thing that you're writing. So don't give up, I think is spot on. So thank you very much for that. Walt, any last words from you, my friend?
I would like to add my thanks to Mark, to you for putting this together, and to the participants on the chat column. And considering overall the kind of comedy books that I tend to write, let me just say from Proverbs 17:22, I think it is, laughter is the best medicine. And let's do what we can to bring joy and laughter to people and entertain them, whether it's comedies or any other kind of artistic endeavor.
Absolutely. Yeah. At the end of the day, I feel my duty is to pass on as much joy and escapism as I possibly can with my story. The fact that, I love writing my stories, and the fact that other people enjoy them as well is kind of a bonus for me. So, but I have had the emails back saying thank you very much for a great story. It's taken me out of my troubles for a period of time, and I'm very grateful for that. So I think if all writers did that, I think we'd be contributing well to the global joy and the global global happiness. So I think that's a worthy thing that we do. So there we go. It just remains for me to say thank you to everybody in the Twitch stream. Hope you have a fantastic week ahead, my friends. Look after yourselves. Usual schedule of Twitch streaming for me will continue, obviously. Thank you very much to FPP for organising MABLE and everything else. Thank you very much to my two authors tonight who've consented to be interviewed. Huge thanks to Mark Henderson and to Walt Pilcher, and blessed we were with not too many technical issues as well, which has been fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody, and we will see you again next week for more author interviews. Take care, look after yourselves, and be good. See you soon, my friends, and good night.